Hi, I'm Sean.
I'm Rhonda.
Let's talk about communication in our marriage. Communication is defined as the imparting or exchange of information.
And it's made up of a speaker and a listener.
And we need to make sure that we're being a good speaker when it's our turn or a good listener.
This is so important for good communication because if we can decide who's the speaker and who's the listener and stay in our roles, it's more likely to flow better.
Let's look at James chapter 1, verse 19. He said, "Let every man be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger."
That's the best communication advice ever.
That's right. Some good skills are being kind, polite, respectful, loving, and considerate. And if we're not doing those things, the opposite is going to be having a negative response from our spouse.
We need to treat our spouse better than we treat other people. So many times in marriage, we treat our coworkers and acquaintances more politely. But when we go deeply in somebody's heart, we have to tread even more gently.
You know, communication is a dialogue. It's not a monologue. There's not just one person doing all the talking.
So you want to be careful that you are boiling it down to only one issue and you're speaking briefly and bouncing back and forth, taking turns.
You know, having a hard heart is going to cause a problem in the relationship. We need to know, is my heart hardened or is my spouse's heart hardened?
We may need third-party help as well.
You know, if we've had bad communication skills in the past, we're going to have to create a new history and a new expectation that our partner has of how this is going to go.
You know, when we look at what's happened with us in the past over our communication, I have trained Sean how I'm going to respond. So when he sees certain facial expressions or tone of voice or hears certain words,
I
he
know
knows
where this is going.
Yeah, and so we have to change those expectations.
That's right. You know, let's look at what it is involved in being a good speaker. We need to improve our presentation and come across in a gentle, open, honest, and friendly way.
We have to reduce the quantity of words, the volume, emotion, and intensity. That's something we women tend to struggle with sometimes, though it goes both ways.
So a poor approach for a speaker would be being indirect, argumentative, going on rabbit trails, or having a harsh startup.
The way we start our conversation when we need to share something can determine where it goes.
You know, sometimes we're making demands of our partner instead of making a request. So let's look at what some good qualities for a listener are. And that would be connecting with your spouse's feelings and their requests.
Also assuming goodwill. Don't assume your spouse is ill-intentioned.
We need to set aside our own agenda. While we're listening to our spouse, we don't need to be thinking, and here's what I have to say, and here's what I think.
There's two sides to what happened. That's true. But if it's not your turn to speak, hold it until it's your turn.
We need to make sure that we're listening carefully with a good attitude, being curious and patient and attentive without distraction.
We want to validate what our spouse is sharing. You know, we don't have to agree to validate, but it's your spouse's experience.
We need to make sure that we're coming across in an approachable way where our spouse feels like they can talk to us about anything. Some poor responses would be becoming overwhelmed, hypervigilant, or hypersensitive. And we need to be aware of having a proper balance in these areas.
Also, a listener could be defensive. If we're defensive, we're probably not listening.
You know, to have good communication, we need to set up a good environment for communication to take place in, and that would be involving examining yourself, making sure that you're present in the moment, and that you're checking your own motives. You know, Jesus put it really well when he said to get the log out of your own eye so that you can see how to get the speck out of your brother's eye.
We want to also create a safe environment for our spouse where they feel emotionally safe.
You know, this is made up of unconditional love and acceptance. You're able to look beyond some of your spouse's imperfections, and you're able to love them anyway.
You also want to work on building your friendship level. If that's fallen apart, it's unlikely you're going to communicate well over difficult topics.
We need to be aware both of ourselves and of our spouse, and that we are being flexible and that we are seeking to please them and adjust to them.
We have to be selfless, not selfish. We have to die to self, so to speak, right? So that we can have two become one.
We need to be able to be empathetic of our spouse and put ourselves in their shoes and feel what it feels like to be them in this situation.
We have to connect with the feelings behind the words and behind the message.
You know, we need to be able to allow choice in our partner. They're not the same as you. They have a different background. They're a different person. We don't need to expect them to think just like we are.
And we need to avoid falling into conflict. That happens in our everyday life. We say something that's pretty innocent, but it escalates quickly. And if we can say, hey, didn't mean for that to escalate, can we save this discussion for later? That will help us be able to work through it.
You know, staying off of triggers is so important. You're probably aware of some sensitive areas that your spouse has. Sometimes we think of these things like landmines. Well, I didn't see that coming, and then there was an explosion. These are things that we need to be aware of and stay off of them.
We also need to set up a good time to talk, and this is key. When we can agree, well, when is it a good time
Right.
for us to work through this issue? It gives us time to pray about it and think about it beforehand.
You know, if our spouse is about to walk out the door to go to do something, we don't need to pick an inappropriate time for them and expect that I'm going to get a good response.
Know that if it escalates, the topic probably isn't the topic, but the problem is more likely the way we're talking
That's
about
right.
the topic.
That's right. We need to make sure that we're not being coming across in a judgmental way, being aggressive, defensive, accusing, or pushy toward our spouse.
We need to be able to take time outs if it is escalating or if we're closing and we're not able to stop it.
And have curiosity. When you see some negative response from your spouse, think there's information there. I need to find out, hey, what's going on? I noticed you had a negative response.
You know, these things, when we interact like this, are wonderful opportunities to develop the fruit of the Spirit. Check out Galatians 5:22 and 23 and 1 Corinthians 13. But the fruit of the Spirit, imagine if your spouse is partaking of those. We've got love, joy, peace,
Patience, kindness, goodness.
gentleness, faithfulness, self-control.
These are all things that are going to make our marriage thrive. And we need to be able to apologize, be able to say, I'm sorry, and be able to forgive. These are all elements that make up good communication in our marriages.